Hey everyone, Dr. Frunky here with an awesome new knife consult on this knife from French knife maker David Lespect. Some of you may be thinking, oh, look at Frunky with a new fixed blade on his channel. This is a beautiful looking knife, but in fact this is a flipper. And this is part of what makes David Lespect's knives so very interesting. I was introduced to these knives around the time of Blade Show 2019. I started to see some pictures on Instagram, and then I got to see these knives in person at the Blade Show. His knives sold out almost immediately, and I see why now. As you can see, they are very elegant little front flippers, and he has a very unique design and manufacturing style that makes his knives very, very special. By that, I mean that no two of his knives are ever going to be exactly the same. David does not use any type of model or mold or tracing or anything to make the knives. His sort of art style involves seeing the knife within the material itself. This is something that he describes. He takes 2 bars of titanium and steel, and he envisions the knife and then draws it and then creates it individually each time without any sort of planning ahead. Now, obviously, this is a very difficult technique. When I described this to some other knife makers, Angie Holt, for instance, thought that was totally crazy. The Holts being on the other side of the spectrum with their CNC-produced, mathematically perfect, and the same every time type of a knife. This one is totally handmade and totally unique every single time. And so, although many of the knives look similar, this is sort of a very standard look for his knives here. They are actually very unique, each one of them being different than the other. So that being said, there is no name to this knife. We basically just call this the David Lespect folder or front flipper or whatever you want to call it. There really is no name. This is just a David Lespect knife. And so we're going to go ahead and get into some of the details on this particular model and talk about his knives in general. So this one features an RWL 34 blade, titanium frame with ironwood scales. And so it's really, really cool to me to see this sort of classy combination of materials. We'll take a look at the size here and get some vital signs. On this particular knife right here, we're looking at maybe about 3.1 inches of overall blade length. The blade edge comes to underneath the handle. It lines up almost exactly so you have the same amount of cutting length. You're just over 7 inches overall, maybe 7.1 inches. For all of my French viewers who might be watching this, you're looking at about an 80 millimeter blade, 180 millimeters of overall length. Your handle is coming in at 100 millimeters right there, or just under 4 inches, which is the same as the effective grip area, given the unique design going on right here. I'll bring out another couple of knives for a quick size comparison. Here we have the Spyderco Para 3 and the Paramilitary 2. If I line all these up, you'll see that the Lespect is even smaller than a Para 3. I can bring out, let me see, what else do I have here? I actually have a production Lespect. If you are looking for a production knife from him, there exists one. This one is made by a company called Editions G. Editions G. It is a French company that has been contracting out some production work for various French makers. This was the David Lespect model. It is not really worth making a video on because it's rather poorly made. It looks quite nice, but there's a tremendous amount of lock stick, and I'm not sure that I can recommend this knife to anybody. Thank you to my Patreon patrons for allowing me to check this one out, but he does in fact have a production knife. I'll bring out another couple of knives that are similar in their functional use. Here's the Gareth Bull Mura in 3.5 inch form right there. And here is another French front flipper that I'm going to be talking about soon. This is the Remy Lavial New Hardy. You can see that the French front flipper market is all very similar in its overall size. I think that these guys know what makes a nice EDC size knife. So let's go ahead and break this knife down anatomically. Up front, as I mentioned, this blade is done in RWL 34. It is a very Lespect shape. This is sort of his classic profile with this drop point, almost sheep's foot style blade. I think that Dmitry Sinkovich has some similar designs. It's a very usable and very nice blade shape because you get a long usable belly, a nice stabby tip, but you also get the downward pointed tip for actual cutting and draw cuts and things like that, which can be helpful in EDC. Now, not only is it useful, it is also beautiful. It has a nice harpoon swedge, beautifully done grinds. You can see how the choil at the back here actually incorporates into the finger area. This is one of the areas that I'm a little bit hesitant about. This is certainly going to fall into the category of gentleman's carry. I would not ever want to use this in any type of hard cutting task because what I worry about is the fact that there's no finger guard here for your hands to slide up and right onto that blade. So I cannot recommend this for anything other than very light EDC, but I'm sure that is the intended purpose, and for that it's totally fine. But as you can see, my hands rest very nicely within that finger groove, and then my thumb rests right on that harpoon. There's a little bit of jimping on the blade right here, right where your thumb sits. There's also jimping on the front of the blade there where you get to your front flipper. So let's finish up here with the blade. It is nicely ground, very thin behind the edge. The thing that I love about this knife, the thing that really stole the show for me that I wasn't expecting, was the edge. A lot of custom knives are beautiful, but maybe they don't cut very well or they aren't the best tools. This one is definitely an amazing tool. He actually uses a slack belt and he puts a convex edge on all of his knives, and then he finishes it off with a strop. This thing has an incredibly fine, very sharp, and what will be very durable edge given that bit of convexity. That's going to be a little bit more difficult for most people to go ahead and grind or sharpen later on, but if you just sharpen it to a V-grind, it's no big deal. But that is something that was really cool that it came from him like that. Moving back to the pivot, as I mentioned before, this is a front flipper. It is running on ceramic bearings. Very, very nice action. The cool thing is that he does not really plan this out ahead of time. I can only imagine that it must be difficult to get a front flipper action this good every single time without planning ahead. So that's really impressive in and of itself. As you can see, that's a bit of a prominent front flipper. And so if you don't like this look, that may be one thing. The way that the front flipper hides when the knife is open is somewhat not as good when the knife is closed. It's quite a prominent front flipper, but it does not really detract that heavily from the knife. I still prefer the front flip to a protruding flipper tab back here in most circumstances. As you can see, I've been able to launch the knife very well. I even missed it once because the detent is very strong. These guys really know how to tune a front flipper. It is not a light detent. You cannot shake the blade out with hard shaking, and it fires every single time, and it's really not that hard to get used to. Very, very nice action. I like the way that he's hidden his logo up there. It's actually kind of upside down. This is a D and an L, David Lespect, but he draws it in this way, in this orientation, kind of looks like a P, but that is in fact his logo. As I mentioned, this is running on ceramic bearings. It has a ceramic detent, very, very smooth on the drop close. As you can see, this is broken in over a few weeks of owning this knife. Moving back to the handles, it has titanium frames with beautifully done shadow box desert ironwood scales. This is a configuration that I really wanted to get. He does beautiful work with these traditional materials. This ironwood. He also does a lot of work with other materials, mammoth and carbon fiber and micartas and other things, but it's nice when you get these handmade knives in these sort of natural materials. It just gives it a soul and a feeling that is very, very nice. It's actually been a theme that I've been sort of following in my collection here. I'm going to try to make videos on all three of these knives right here. We've got the Lavial New Hardy we saw earlier, and this is the Frank Sous Vide Super Bad in collaboration with Tashi Barusha. I've been doing a lot of this ironwood type collecting, all three of these being French knives, and I just really like the way that these guys work with this stuff. Very, very handsome and classy. Definitely not as flashy as I've been doing, and I like that a lot. He has 3 screws holding the scales on right here, and on this particular model, he made a pocket clip. The French makers don't typically make pocket clips. They send their knives in these beautiful slips. This is an awesome little slip that he made for the knife itself, so I could carry this in my pocket without a clip. That is the traditional French style, but they are starting to realize the potential of the American market, and that most of the American market will want the clip. It functions very well. It's a bit stiff, but there's enough ramp, and it's thin enough, and it's smooth enough on the scale that it just slides right onto your pocket. So very well done. It doesn't show too much of the knife sticking out of the pocket. It rides deeply enough that there's enough to grab onto, and it's still very subtle. As you've probably noticed, there is a G10 Back Spacer done in a scalloped sort of technique here. It's really beautiful. Notice how it's scalloped here, and it actually transitions to convex right there. Beautiful transition. You can see how the lines come together here at the tail of the knife, and you can just see the quality of the fit and finish and how tightly everything fits together. So, what do I think of this knife? Well, it has seriously gained a lot of attention for its looks. The David Lespect folder has a very unique look, and it very much deserves the attention that it's getting, because not only does it look good, but it also functions very, very well. It's nicely ergonomic in the hand. As you've noticed, these are nicely contoured scales, fits beautifully in the hand. It's very lightweight. I didn't actually measure the weight for you guys, but given that it's just a thin piece of titanium with these ironwood scales, the weight is coming in at 3.77 ounces, so under 4 ounces, very carryable, very EDCable, and just a lot of fun. The front flipper mechanism, love it or hate it, I love it, and so it's a lot of fun to fiddle with. And then you get to the blade itself, nicely, thinly ground. It has a beautifully done edge that's convex, and it just cuts for days. And it's just spectacularly finished. This is a gentleman that understands subtlety and the way that a design should go together. And you will notice in every single knife that he makes very subtle and special touches that makes each one of them very awesome. So if you have not already followed David Lespect on Instagram, I highly recommend it. He sells his knives through there randomly and mostly at shows. This one I was very lucky to happen to get from him by just simply asking, so it never hurts to send a maker a message and just say, hello, can I have a knife? So you could give that a try for what it's worth, but definitely very cool knife. Tell me what you guys think of the David Lespect folder down below. I'm blown away. This is in a class of its own, a truly special front flipper knife that would be nice in anyone's collection, and I'm truly happy to have it in mine. So thank you guys for watching. Go ahead and click like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for some more videos. Go ahead and leave some comments down below. Follow me on Instagram at Dr. Frunky, and as always, take care.